You're listening to the Executive Coach Podcast with me, Maya Goodker, and welcome to the Career Reboot series. This month, you'll be waking up to a daily curated series of episodes to listen to with your morning coffee. Your go-to guides to keeping you motivated, strategic, and able to have fun in your career, especially as some of us might be limping a little bit towards the summer holidays. And as you listen in this month, you might find it useful to have my Career Blindspots scorecard to hand, which you can download from the link in the show notes. So let's dive into today's episode. In the world of work, what's easiest is rarely most effective. That's a quote from Cal Newport. And this episode is about the concept of slow productivity, which is a concept from Cal Newport, one that he continues to develop. I wouldn't say he's entirely pinned it down, but he's put some principles around it, which I want to share. In January, I shared a post about this on LinkedIn via my newsletter, and then basically been putting his concepts into practice over the last 6 months. So I thought it would be nice to both share the concept with you and then 6 months down the line, share where I am with the concept and, review how it's going for me, and then maybe check in again at the end of the year to see what a year of slow productivity has been like for me. So what is this concept all about? I think it's a really timely concept in the productivity world. So on one hand, in the productivity literature, you've got hacks, life hacks, where you can shave off minutes here and there. And it's about lots of quick tips and tricks. That's fine. Equally, we have the concept of knowledge workers, a lot of us that do work at desks rather than physically doing, other forms of work. But as knowledge workers, we can't just increase our output infinitely, right? Like with a factory widget, you can continuously enhance production, and you may get a really linear or, beyond linear forms of productivity. As a human being, as a knowledge worker, that's unlikely to happen. However, we can manage our distraction and attention. And thanks to books like Oliver Burkeman's 4,000 Weeks, we can also take a more meta perspective, I guess, which is that, life is miraculous. We're cosmically insignificant, as he describes it, when you think about the entire universe and how lucky we are to even exist. He would say it's pointless to get too caught up in mastering our time. So you've got all of these different approaches, from the tips and tricks and hacks to the reality of being a knowledge worker and basically having to manage energy, time, and attention, to these bigger picture approaches, which is sort of saying, look, we're all going to die anyway, just make the most of life, don't get too hung up on it. So there's no official definition for slow productivity yet. But here's my attempt, which is that it's about significantly extending the timescales over which you expect to execute and achieve important goals. So much more is possible, but don't expect it to happen tomorrow. And as a coach, I love this because it fits with a lot of the longer term visioning work that I do with clients. And I really hear now a lot of individuals feeling that tension between wanting to smell the roses and slow down and appreciate what they have versus the desire and the drive to still achieve ambitious goals. And in the face of that tension, slow productivity is a really compelling concept. Unlike much time management literature, which is, I think, been written by writers who haven't worked inside organization, and that is a bit of a bugbear of mine. What I like about slow productivity is that it can work whether you're an employee in an organization or whether you're an independent worker. And this is what Cal Newport says about it. The central goal of slow productivity is to keep an individual worker's volume at a sustainable level. the natural fear is that by reducing the amount of work that each employee tackles at any given time, it might reduce the total amount of work that an organization is able to complete, making it less competitive. But this fear is unfounded. When an individual's work volume increases, so does the accompanying overhead, stress, and this reduces the time remaining to actually execute the tasks and the quality of the results. If you instead enable the worker to work more sequentially, so one task after another, complete one thing, and then move on to the next, focusing on a small number of things at a time, waiting till she's done before bringing on new obligations, the rate at which she completes tasks overall might actually increase. So I think this is really compelling, having worked both inside organizations and outside them. Slow productivity against this definition means that it can both reduce personal overwhelm and increase focus. And yet you can still achieve big goals at less personal cost. I think this is a real win-win. So thanks, Cal. Now, the question is, how can we as individuals put this into practice? And I'm going to break down 3 steps here to get us all, in a more tangible mindset of what we could do to move towards this way of doing things. And as I talk about these, you might think, actually, there's a lot of this that I would naturally do already. And part of my journey in reflecting over the last 6 months has been realizing some of this I would have done anyway, but it's just nice to put a bit of a frame around it and see it in this bigger picture of a concept of slow productivity. So the first thing that you can do is, when you have a choice about whether you want to do an activity or delegate work simultaneously or sequentially, try the sequential option. Now, what do I mean by that? If you've got 3 big jobs on your list that you need to get done, you can either give them all to somebody to do at the same time, or you can wait for them to do one and then give them the next and then give them the next. And likewise, as an individual, you can either sort of think that you've got these 3 projects on the go, or you can treat them one at a time. So it's one project at a time, wherever this is possible. I always go back to my locus of control circles, where some of this will be in your control at any given time and some of it will not. What is within your control? What decision-making power do you have here? And let's work with that to move us towards this concept. And I say this because I know it can be really frustrating when you hear an idea or a concept and you think, yeah, but that's just not going to work for me right now. And then it makes you feel a bit frustrated, a little bit like you haven't been fully understood by the person sharing the ideas. And it can put you off the whole concept. And I really, as a coach, want to sort of break down some of that to say, hold on. Often we do have some choices and we haven't necessarily examined our default. So have a look over the next week or 2 and think, ooh, okay, there are 2 different approaches here. Here I'm going to make this little choice in this direction and take it, as it comes in that way. Now, what I like about this idea of going sequential wherever possible is it's a bit of a variation of that concept of you can have it all, but not at once. And I definitely think that in the world that I coach in, it can also help alleviate the superwoman or superman archetype, which I work with frequently. I must say that it does come up more with women, and this is a whole separate podcast episode. But that idea of, trying to do it all at once. I personally decided to do a work-life version of this by scaling back my work to focus on the final parts of a house renovation. And I made a decision, and it wasn't an easy decision. We would finish the house renovation sooner and we would make better decisions, pay less rent, hopefully make fewer mistakes if I was able to give my full brain to the project, which had been basically occupying the edges of our time for months already. But I wanted to make it kind of the main event. And I'll get into my reflections in that 6 months on, how I've sort of experienced that, how I've found that. The second thing that you can do is Choose exciting, ambitious projects which require perseverance, but which won't happen overnight. And again, you're not going to be able to just pluck these out of thin air. When you're faced with some options, or when you're in a bit more of a brainstorming mindset, when you're talking to somebody who might be a coach or a mentor or a loved one, and you're scheming and strategizing over the next period of time, have a think about some things that would get you really excited if you could look back a year on or 2 years on and say, oh yeah, I managed to do that. And yet you might talk yourself out of it if you're not thinking in that slow productivity mindset. So these are the kind of projects where a week here or there is not going to derail the project over the course of a year. What is going to derail these projects is giving up prematurely, not taking regular action over a long-term period. Those are the things that are going to derail a slow productivity project. And that's actually really nice because you can take a week out. And Cal Newport talks about this. He says that actually in the slow productivity mindset, a week is not a problem. You don't need to stress. If your kid's ill, or if you're ill, or if there's some other crisis coming up, that's okay. Because in the slow productivity mindset, it's a bigger picture, it's a longer term approach, and a week here or there isn't going to knock the whole thing. But if you don't carve out the time on a regular basis to work on it, or if you just give up, that's what's going to derail it. Some questions here for you. Think about what high value outcomes there are in your work and your personal life. What would you love to achieve? And if you're struggling, on this, which, as I say, these are not easy questions. This is why I'm a coach, is to kind of help people work on these questions. But some other prompts for you: who are your role models and why, and what are they doing? Who sparks inspiration? And as I always say, who sparks envy in you? What are the things that you see and you think, oh gosh, I'd quite like to have done something like that? Use these to inform your slow productivity goals. For me, this is around publishing, research, books, articles, and building a sustainable coaching business. These might be part of my slow productivity work goals, whereas my day-to-day will be executing and delivering coaching. For my clients, it would be something like leading a major transition at work or a disruptive venture at work. In fact, a lot of my clients have come to me because they are at that part of the organization where they're needing to push through a major change. And it typically does need to be something they're personally aligned with as well. But it could also be about securing their next role, promotion, or making bigger career transitions. And sometimes it's about undertaking further study. Those are tangible outcomes, but we also work on less tangible outcomes, such as better emotional regulation or communication skills. These aren't going to be things that you see the results of, within a week. It could be about building really solid networks inside and outside your organization, building expertise to share insights and write about, your expertise. These can all also fit, and they work really well with a slow productivity mindset. They're not something which naturally will happen overnight, but if they're chiseled away at over a really long time frame with a lovely vision articulated about them, then they can be really helpful. I'll just give you a small example. I was working with a client recently, and we were talking about they've got some big work transitions coming up, and they really want to make sure that they have a strong senior network within their organization. And I asked, what in an ideal world, what in 1 year's time would a great relationship look like with one of these, the guy that was being groomed for CEO? What would that relationship look like? And it was really simple. It was basically having their mobile number and being able to WhatsApp them and say, can I have 5 minutes of your time to be able to discuss this fairly urgent issue? And so if you think about that, it does signify a different type of relationship. You've exchanged mobile numbers, you're on WhatsApp, you're not just on email. And you're able to basically request their time on urgent issues. It might not seem like much, but actually it is a very different relationship. But if that's the ideal relationship over the course of a year, there's so much that can be done to pave the way for that, so that almost becomes a really natural output. Okay, so I've given a couple of examples there about what these bigger, longer term outcomes might look like. The third element of this slow productivity, and I think this is so crucial, is getting satisfied with the day-to-day. So when I wrote this first post about slow productivity, I was still living in the flat. We were in really the worst part of the renovation. And, on one hand, I sort of caveated it as first world problems, but others that I've spoken to that have gone through significant renovations, they all agree there is a point when you really do reach a bit of a rock bottom. But I had written about finding satisfaction in both where we were living, which was opposite our renovation site, which was still, in hindsight, a really great position to be in, to be able to sort of check in on the project 1, 2, sometimes 3 times a day, being able to kind of rush over and answer questions if required. We had lovely neighbours in part of the complex that we were staying in that we're still in touch with, and we still gone and paid them a few visits. And I basically had a ritual of going and getting a cappuccino every day at about 11 o'clock. And that was my little luxury. And so there was definitely joy in the day-to-day. And as long as you can do this, and I also got my gratitude journal out again, which is just, naming 3 things you're grateful for before bed, which I've always found helps me rewire when things are feeling a little bit grim. And as long as we can do all of this, we can build towards these bigger projects, which don't have the immediate payoff. And so this is, I think, the real crux of getting satisfied with the day-to-day, because the urge to get fast results can be linked to our short-term dissatisfaction with the here and now. We want immediate transformation. We love a before and after picture, don't we? They're so compelling, but they are also a bit dangerous because they miss out that messy in between. And slow productivity requires us to get comfortable and appreciative of our current day-to-day, not fight it. And we can seek immediate rewards elsewhere. So we can do the gratitude reward log. We can have nice to-do lists or to-do lists, which we can tick off for those of us who need that sense of achievement, satisfaction, connection with our loved ones, simple rituals like my coffee ritual, good baths, nature walks. These can all help us get more satisfied with our day-to-day existence. This is something I take really seriously, and you will hear me referring to this in different ways during the podcast. But I think in the context of slow productivity, it's a real cornerstone. Then we can take on these bigger projects and keep investing over the long term without burning out. So those are 3 of the steps that I think can really help us think about slow productivity in the context of our own lives. Now, I wanted to just reflect a bit about 6 months on since I wrote this first post around slow productivity, how it's panned out for me, just to give you some ideas and some of my reflections. A few different things. It's been a really hectic first half of the year. We had some big milestone birthdays going on, extra trips, which I'm not complaining about, but they did all come sort of at once. So we just had a lot going on. So I had made this decision in January, February to say, I'm going to just really take the focus off work and I'm going to put the focus on the house. But some really good stuff happened along the way. And actually, sometimes business requires patience. And because I wasn't leaning on it and sort of hovering over my business, sort of saying, okay, has this happened yet? And has this happened? It all just unfolded. And over 6 months, when I look back, I can say that there's been some really good progress. So that worked well. Once I was in a good place with the house, I said, okay, before I really dive back into the business, I need to get this application, a coaching accreditation application done. And that had been hovering over my head. I'd had to rework it. And it was one of those things that just required a real head mindset shift so that I could get into the zone and just get over the inertia that there is to sort of open it up again, remind myself of everything that I needed to do on it and just bash away. And I do remember spending, the first day that I had cleared time to do this, I remember spending time and texting a friend who was also trying to do a bit of a writing project, just really struggling mentally to get my head around what I needed to do. And so once I'd done a bit more of that, and once I'd made a bit more progress, once it all made a bit more sense, I was on a more of a roll. But I was following this sequential thing. We'd moved back into the house, got a few other things out of the way. And the next big item on my list, which I had completely parked until that point, was that application. So that's now in. We had some other trips and other what I call interruptions happening. And then I had one of my programs that I was due to be coaching on was actually cancelled. And this was literally the week before the half year finished. So the last week of June. And I remember talking to my coach then and saying, oh my God, I've literally cleared this entire week to be on this program. And now it has come free. And I shouldn't say this because actually, obviously, from an income perspective, it wasn't very good to have that cancelled. But I was secretly relieved because we have just had a lot going on. And she said, oh, okay, so what does that mean? Are you going to get started on your podcast now? Are you going to get started on your courses? And I said, no, actually, I'm not. It's the last week of this first half of the year. This has been, a bit of a mega half year on various fronts. I'm going to have a real mop-up week. I am going to get on top of finances stuff, admin, that nagging but not urgent stuff on your to-do list. I'm just going to blitz it, because until I've done that, I don't really feel like I'm on top of my life. And so to me, this was a little bit of a slow productivity thing where I wasn't ready to embark on the next project yet. And I wanted to go with that energy. And I actually said to my coach, look, trust me here. In 6 months, yes, if I haven't recommenced the podcast, if I haven't made headway on some of these other work commitments, then you can come and howl me. But I know myself, and I'm not a huge procrastinator. I think we all have some procrastination in us. And especially when things really matter to us, I've noticed that's when I procrastinate. But I said, just trust me here. I will get to it, but it's not for now. And looking back on that and reflecting, actually, that was a slow productivity approach I chose to take. And the world around us will sometimes encourage us, to cast aside the slow productivity and sort of plunge into the next thing. And, even when you've got other things lingering on that need to be finished, do it all at the same time. And no, actually, I pushed back. I'm really glad that I pushed back. And I ended up finishing some stuff, not getting through the to-do list to the extent that I wanted, but we had some other stuff crop up with the house that, because I had that time cleared, I was able to do it really well, and be on top of it and it not be, a kind of a last minute crisis. So it worked out really well. So I could go on and on here, as you can see, but as I'm reflecting, I can see that this slow productivity stuff has worked really well for me. Now, I've got a couple of things that if I look back on this year in December and I have done, then I can hand on heart say that it's been a good year. And I'm going to get really clear on those. I'm going to rewrite those now because we are partway through the year. I'm going to make sure that those are the ones that I want to be able to sort of celebrate in December. And then I'm going to report back to you in December on how this has gone. And it's not been easy for me to I've been always somebody in my life that's had various projects on the go, too many projects on the go. That was fine in my 30s. I don't really want to do that anymore in my 40s. So I'm going to touch base with you in a few months and let you know how it continues to go. I would love to hear what your thoughts are on slow productivity, whether it's something that you naturally do anyway, or whether it feels like a really timely concept for you. Do let me know, and I look forward to connecting with you next time. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to Life Work with Maya. If you've got to this point, I'm guessing you found it valuable. So do share the link with somebody else who can benefit. In an age of materialism and us trying to stay on top of clutter, what could be nicer than to send a non-clutter digital link to somebody and say, I listened to this and I thought you might love it. What a great way to show your care and consideration for them. If you haven't left a review, now is the time, and make sure that you are subscribed on Spotify or you're following along on Apple Podcasts. And if you really want to help the show grow, then do share the link on IG stories, Instagram stories, or reshare or discuss your thoughts with my LinkedIn posts. You can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram. Do feel free to send me messages there. I love having dialogue with my listeners, and the links to those handles are in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to connecting with you next time. Bye-bye.